Welcome to Thinking Like a Lawyer with your hosts Ellie Mistal and Joe Patrice, talking about legal news and pop culture, all while thinking like a lawyer. Here on Legal Talk Network.
Hello, welcome to another edition of Thinking Like a Lawyer. I'm Joe Patrice from Above the Law. I'm joined by Catherine Rubino. Is she there?
I am.
You are? Okay.
I am. I'm sorry. I thought you were gonna say something else about me, like, that I'm also, an editor at Above the Law, or that, I'm the best person or I thought that'd be more of an introduction, to be honest.
Yeah, no, there wasn't any more of an introduction.
That's your name. That's your name.
Well, it's weird that we're both at the same publication, right? I'm from Above the Law, and here's somebody else also from Above the Law. I don't know. I feel...
I mean, you can put whatever manner of superlatives you are feeling at the moment into my intro.
I put every superlative I'm currently feeling in there.
I kind of walked right into that one, didn't I?
Yeah. I mean, I might have felt other superlatives before, but right now I'm feeling, I think I stand by the original. So we are here again to... check in on the week in legal news.
The legal news to one side, the news of the world is not encouraging still. We're still not doing great as a society.
Right. Obviously, that's true. And this episode isn't live, so we're doing this before the outbreak of zombies or whatever it is that's going to happen over the weekend.
I'm not encouraged that it'll get better by the time this airs.
No, I think that's fair. But nonetheless, we have a show today where we're going to talk about a few things. Most, the big ones are going to be legal stories that place the Trump administration front and center. We have a big story about what's going on in the Michael Flynn case, which is a case that's been kicking around for a long time. A lot of people may or may not know all the ins and outs of it. So we're going to try to do a quick little explainer of where we sit.
In fairness, they just might have forgotten at this point. It's been ongoing for long enough, and other things are going on.
That's fair. But yeah, so we're going to do a quick little rundown of exactly where the state of play is in that particular case right now. And then, I don't know, maybe we'll talk about pants.
Okay. So, let's start with the Flynn case.
Well, one thing about the Flynn case is that it's been going on a while, and a lot of the issues deal with some of the discovery material that was supposedly, arguably, should have been turned over. It's a criminal case, so it's not like it's a massive amount of discovery material like there are in civil cases. And in a civil case, if you're out there and you're trying to cut costs, then you're not alone. In today's climate, a 5-figure e-discovery bill per month is steep. Don't pay that. Use Logical to reduce expense and control your discovery process. Get started today for only $250 per matter, and they'll waive migration costs from competing platforms. For more information, visit logical.com/LTN. That's logic with a K. CULL.com/LTN. So the crux of the Flynn case is that Michael Flynn, a former general who was briefly national security advisor for the Trump administration, had conversations out of turn, basically, with Russia, Turkey, with foreign officials that, were problematic. Now, at the end of the day, there may not be any real crime in the specific things he did, but he then proceeded to lie about these conversations to
that's how they got Little Kim.
It is, in fact, how they got Lil' Kim. And it's one of those things that people outside of law, I see sometimes people who are non-lawyers spouting off on Facebook about how criminal this investigation is because there was no underlying crime or something like that. But the issue really is that there's a
can't lie to the government. That's really the issue.
Law enforcement, which obviously we've been talking about police and law enforcement and a lot of negative aspects of it over the last few days, but it has a real interest in ensuring that when it asks you questions, you tell the truth. And that's kind of the whole point. And so if you're making false statements to them, they don't like that. And it is not entrapment for you to say, I have a feel, I know what's going on, and I'm going to ask him straight out, did this happen? And then that person lies. That's not entrapment. That's you lying to the government.
Right. I mean, there's literally a right that you don't have to answer.
Yes. It's like enshrined in the, they say it on TV shows all the time.
Like that is part of the daily propaganda we hear about law enforcement all the time.
In any event, Flynn hired high-powered, very competent lawyers. They walked him through exactly what was going on and advised him that his best bet was to plead guilty, which he did. He then confessed under oath twice because of the vagaries of the case in front of different judges. Twice confessed to committing all the elements of the crime. At this point, you would think that you're ready to sentence.
I think we're done. I think okay, why are we spending any more time or effort doing anything else? Just sentence him to jail and let's
or
let
whatever.
That happen.
And that's normally the plan. However, the administration made a move in which the attorney general appointed a different lawyer who hadn't been involved with the case up until now. All the people who had been involved with the case did not sign on to this really. And they said they were dropping the prosecution.
But it already had happened, Joe.
Yeah, so that's one thing.
It was done.
One of the key arguments that people make in Flynn's defense is that the government should have the ability, it's prosecutorial discretion, they should have the ability to decide whether or not they're going to prosecute somebody. And that's all fair and good. Unfortunately, they have made that decision, and then they prosecuted him, and then he swore under oath that these things were true. We're really past the point where they have much say in what's going on, and that's why there's a provision that allows them to withdraw, but even that provision requires that the judge give permission for this case to end, and the judge does not seem inclined to do so. Judge Sullivan doesn't think that this case should be over. Judge Sullivan made those thoughts known. He also suggested that there's a possibility that he should, of his own accord, independently of whether or not we go forward with the underlying crimes here, he should slap criminal contempt charges on Flynn for lying under oath when he confessed twice.
So that seems fair, at least from my perspective. But I know that I've seen a lot of headlines about a different judge, Judge Gleason. How do we have a different judge involved now? So
at that point, there were some attempts to smack down Judge Sullivan for having these feelings. Judge Sullivan's position was, well, the best way of doing this is I've been close to this case. Let's bring in someone else independently to look at everything that happened and opine. And he reached out to Debevoise and Plimpton, the law firm that we all know, that one of their partners is John Gleason, who used to be an Eastern District of New York federal judge who is highly respected and well-placed to take an independent crack at this. And he did. He reviewed all the evidence and gave his recommendation. His recommendation was not particularly kind to the Department of Justice. The word corrupt was utilized. It's not a good one. Yeah, no, not one of those good ones. He came to the conclusion, essentially, that there was no warrant for the government to drop this case. They have to make some sort of showing of why they're doing it, that it's been haphazard and seems to be politically motivated and corrupt. There's a reason why it seems that way. That the rule that we have that requires the court to offer their leave before the government can drop out was designed for the sole purpose of avoiding, he says, or at least primary purpose of avoiding these sorts of politically motivated prosecutorial decisions, and therefore he recommends that Judge Sullivan not do that and advance immediately to sentencing. Do not collect $200. Yeah, exactly. The only bright spot for Flynn is that he concludes that Judge Sullivan is entirely within his rights to slap Flynn with a perjury charge vis-a-vis his criminal contempt powers, to the extent that independent of the prosecutors going after them. That's the whole thing about separation of powers. The prosecutors could go after Flynn for perjury. However, in this instance, they have no interest. But the judge, using their inherent powers to say that this was contemptuous of the tribunal, could say, you lied under oath to me, and so I can penalize you for that. Sure. Judge Gleason says that power is something that Judge Sullivan absolutely has and would be well within his bounds to exercise, though in throwing Flynn a bone, he says he would recommend that Sullivan not use that power and instead just take this into account when sentencing on the underlying crime.
Well, it still doesn't sound great for Flynn.
It doesn't. But the real crux of this case, I think, for a lot of folks, and I mean, most of our listeners are legally trained in some way, and either law students or paralegals or outright lawyers, but not everybody does criminal law, and so some of these concepts may not be top of mind. But when you see some of the commentary going around about how Flynn was entrapped, railroaded, how this is a violation of the separation of powers, what it's important to know is that all of these claims that you're hearing are stupid and wrong and based on nothing more than wild conspiracy theories. That from an actual legal perspective, no, the guy committed a crime and we've gotten to that point and he's confessed and now we're ready to sentence.
Sounds reasonable to me, but maybe I'm not the right audience there.
But it's the big deal to this week, and it speaks to a more important issue, right? Which is a former federal judge is willing to write the word corrupt when describing the Department of Justice, which I didn't think that we would see that. Yeah. Mistaken, incorrect, unjustified in this instance. These are the sorts of terms that you might have expected someone to use. And when a judge is going that next level, in particular one who has a sterling reputation like this, that it's indicative of a deeper problem. I've talked to actually a number of former federal judges and current federal judges about this over the last bit. Talked to a former federal judge about it today, in fact, and what they confide in me when I ask straight up about it is that they've never seen this kind of behavior from the Department of Justice. That the idea that you would drop a case after you've got a conviction is
bizarre.
A guilty plea is so foreign, unless there's something like, the DNA came back and it was wrong.
Right. We have new evidence came through and,
And I think it is important to remember that even though we're talking about this potential perjury charge for lying when you confess, it is a real problem in not just federal, in the criminal justice system as a whole, that prosecutors, because of the harsh penalties and the different gradations of penalties out there, there are often situations where people confess to actions they don't necessarily believe that they took in order to get a lesser sentence or something like that. So the idea that there's some purity, and I think this probably plays into why Judge Gleason's hesitant to go forward with advising a criminal contempt charge here, is that you want to be able to say that, in another big story that's going around now, which has nothing to do with any of this, recalls some of the events of the Central Park 5 case, the famous case in New York where 5 people minority teens were put in jail for a crime that ultimately it turns out they didn't commit at all. But they all confessed ultimately because that was how they could lessen their sentences and stuff like that. And you don't want a situation where you're blaming people criminally for confessing to things under those sorts of circumstances. The distinction here, of course, being that Flynn is a highly sophisticated government official when this is all going down, who is represented by a well-respected big law firm and with attorneys who knew what they were doing. So the sympathy is a little bit less.
Yeah,
it's not like kids who are being railroaded, which was more the case with Central Park 5, but that is a concern. And for those who want to downplay that he pled guilty twice, and there are definitely those people that I see in Facebook feeds and stuff like that, those people are dancing around a point, but in this instance, the circumstances really don't back them up.
Fair.
Yeah.
So that seems like a pretty big deal in the world of legal news.
Yeah, no, that was the first big bit of news for them this week. Then the administration got another shockwave when Noel Francisco, the Solicitor General, has decided he's going to step down.
He's out.
This is the job of the person who argues the government's case before the Supreme Court. So we're going to be getting somebody new to talk about all of the Supreme Court cases.
So do you have any ideas? You want to put any lines down on who you think will get the nod next?
The most logical decision would be to elevate John Wall, who's the principal deputy there.
Mm-hmm.
He could take over this job. He could do it on an acting basis, which wouldn't require any kind of confirmation hearing. But as the principal deputy, he could move up, continue doing the job. There's only a few more months in the job, at least within this term. Not saying what will happen after that, but there's only a few more months anyway. Why have a confirmation fight? Just do that. That is certainly an option. Deputy White House Counsel, Patrick Philbin apparently wants the job. It's unclear how that would play into this. There are other crazy lawyers in the president's orbit who may have more of that rabid dog loyalty that he seems to appreciate, whereas people like Wall and Philbin are career government lawyers, basically. Philbin was part of the W. Bush administration too.
Right.
These are real public servants,
real options that you would expect in any Republican administration, not just Trump specific kind of folks.
The Republican legal industrial complex.
Right. That's a great way of phrasing it. I like that.
It's a longer name. We usually abbreviate that to Jones Day, but whatever. But yeah, but there are other options.
Nicely played, Patrice.
Yeah, there are other options, of course. Like Jay Sekulow, who's been representing him in all these things. You could try to get him nominated and confirmed for this. It's not like the Senate couldn't vote on a strict party line nature like they have been with all these judges. Alan Dershowitz is still out there. Ken Starr.
Wow, that would be those.
All of these people are there, and they've all made clear
They've already sold
their
soul,
loyalties. So they, it's going to be interesting because I think there could be some serious issues going forward here. I mean, obviously we've had a lot of arguments already, and we're winding down to the end of this term. So we're more in decisions coming out time than new arguments. But I mean, there are still emergency motions, stuff like that happen. Requests for them to intervene on cases that they probably shouldn't, which is one of the things that Francisco is very good about, getting Supreme Court intervention long before the natural course of the process would tend to get there. So whoever has this job will have some significant things to do.
And yet another fight, I guess, that will happen before we see the end of the longest year that has ever been.
So I feel bad because I just keep talking, and I see that I've talked for quite some time here. Do you...
Well, I thought you were relatively interesting.
Oh, well, thank you. But no, I mean, it just seems,
seems
as though I'm dominating this, which I don't intend
I mean, listen, you've handled both of those stories for Above the Law. It makes sense. I think they're both very timely, very interesting, while I have mostly been writing about lawyers acting terribly this week.
Yeah. What's the lawyers acting terribly beat?
Well, I guess the first one is not actually a lawyer, but a operations manager at a small law firm in Arizona who's also married to the name partner of the firm. She was caught on video storming into a gas station, confronting the clerks and demanding to be helped before the woman who's trying to check out of the gas station, telling the woman that she needed to go back to her country, and then pushing her, in which case the woman that was being accosted hauled off and just slapped her across the face.
Nice.
Which, is not something you see every day. The aggressor, the kind of one who said that, go back to your own country, that her husband came out and said that his wife has been undergoing periods of paranoia and delusion for the last year or so, and they're hoping to get her help. They're hopeful that this incident, the public nature of it, will make her realize that she needs help.
So a bit of a sad turn at the end there.
Yeah. I mean, a less
Thanks for bringing us all down.
Yeah, a less sad version happens in Texas, where an attorney has admitted that he egged a judge's car because he was upset over the pandemic stay-at-home order. He's now being charged with a misdemeanor. I believe it was a reckless some misdemeanor. I forget the exact one. And he's pled not guilty, although he has given interviews explaining he did, in fact, egg the judge's car. But he says he cleaned it up, and it was all in good fun. It was really all in good fun. He wanted to show the judge that he laid an egg over his, quote, unconstitutional pandemic order.
That seems like a ridiculous reason, but it also seems as though, I feel as though eggings are the sort of thing that we shouldn't be bringing the criminal justice system.
Well, listen, it's a
involved
misdemeanor. It's punishable by a $150 fine. And it does definitely seem like not appropriate behavior.
No, I think that's very true. It gets to a real issue in some of these. In New York, obviously, it's different where we both practiced. It's it's a little bit more professionalized than I think it is in some other areas. And that's not a dig on other areas of the country. It's just more a comment on how small other areas of the country are. Judges are people that you might have practiced with or against or been in your own firm, or like the relationships can be a little bit less imperious than they can be in New York, where judges are on that side and we're over here.
That's
like
fair.
Maybe you worked with them at a big law firm, but even that's kind of weirdly hierarchical. And so I always am a little, in this case it probably was not professional behavior, but it is one of those situations where you think, what if this judge is somebody that is a personal friend of theirs, and they were playing a prank, and that sort of stuff. It's a fine line because obviously you want to respect the job, but
Sure. Less of a fine line is the attorney who was arrested twice, not once, but twice over the course of a weekend for doing a bunch of things, including spitting in a protester's face. A black kid, 17 years old, high school student. She pulled her car in front of peaceful protesters that were marching. She pulled her car in front of the group, got out of the car, and started confronting them over the protest. And when the group was kind of like, move your car, like we're going to keep on moving, she turned around and spat in this kid's face. And she was arrested. She was charged, for that crime, but not put in jail because of the county's COVID-19 regulations.
Which is ironic because it seems as though if she was spitting, she wasn't wearing masks or anything either.
She was not. She was. And there's also video of that. Don't worry. There's also video. But as a result of that, there were also protests in front of her house because people were quite upset. And during that incident, when they were protesting in front of her house, she left her house, came out to confront the protesters, shoved somebody, and then when police arrived to arrest her again, she kneed one of the officers in the groin, allegedly. So she's facing those charges as well.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then this is like this is the week for people to act terribly, which frankly, it makes a little bit of sense, I suppose. But there was also the attorney that called George Floyd a shit stain, which was pretty awful.
Yeah.
So that happened. There was also just a bunch of folks online making all sorts of inappropriate comments about the recent protests, and one attorney, when the local bar association sent a all members email taking a stand with the protesters and Black Lives Matter and so on and so forth, the attorney just did a reply all with just the word stop. So that was fun.
And that was in the South
Carolina, yeah. Yeah,
not that it's geographically limited per se, but if you're gambling.
Yes, I believe the lawyer who spit was from Wisconsin, I believe.
Yeah, see, there you go.
So, it could be anywhere. And I think there was actually finally a resolution to another long-term lawyers behaving badly incident.
Yeah, and it's also one that has some notes of sadness in it. The $54 million lawsuit over a missing pair of pants is finally completely over. This is a former administrative law judge in D.C. sued his dry cleaners for losing a pair of his pants. The damages swelled to $67 million at one point. He lowered that to be reasonable to $54. This is a case that he lost, as you might imagine. But, it gave rise to some ethical questions of whether or not a judge was misusing the judicial system to sue a bunch of dry cleaners over a missing pair of pants for millions of dollars. And at the end of the day, this has been going on for a while, but the Court of Appeals in D.C. has finally weighed in and agreed with the disciplinary board and given him a 90-day suspension for all this. And this has gone on since it's been over a decade at this point.
Wow.
So, I think the pants were lost in 2005. So it's been a while.
God bless.
But
God
90
bless.
days with this. Now, the notes of sadness is that this former judge has made clear that during the time when this was all going on, he was out of work and had very little money and was stressed out, and it was bad, and it seems as though it came at a very bad point in his life. That said, he carried on this case for quite some time, and he continued until recently, continues as far as one knows, to believe that the disciplinary board giving him a mere 90 days for this is because they're, racist agents out to get him and stuff. So, there's some sad notes to it too, but finally it's over. In 3 months, we'll be completely past this whole issue, unless, the U.S. Supreme Court takes it or something. I don't know.
Well, it seems like it's been a pretty shitty week, you guys.
Yeah, so there've been things.
It's not been a great week for a lot of people.
But I mean, that's the point. That's why you read Above the Law, and that's why you listen to this podcast, to get your rundown on the terrible things that law people do. And so we're glad that you joined us today to hear all those things. Again, read Above the Law, listen to this podcast. You should also check out our special reports, the ATL COVID cast, where we're talking to people who in the legal industry and around it who are giving us insights on unexpected ways that the pandemic is going to change the legal profession. You should be listening to the Jabot, where Catherine talks to women and minority folks about diversity in law firms and social justice issues. You should check out the other shows on the Legal Talk Network that don't necessarily involve us. You should be following us on social media. I'm at Joseph Patrice. She's at Catherine1. And with all of those things said, I think, give us reviews and stars and all that sort of thing on the podcast subscription place where you found this. And then that's it. And thanks to Logical for sponsoring. And now I'm done.
There you go.
All right. Talk to everyone later. Bye.
If you'd like more information about what you've heard today, please visit LegalTalkNetwork.com. You can also find us at AboveTheLaw.com, ATLRedline.com, iTunes, RSS, Twitter, and Facebook. The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, Legal Talk Network, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer.